In Civilization 6, mistakes can be more catastrophic than the Aragon movie was, but none of these Civ 6 mistakes are worse than settling mistakes. Settling the right cities are the difference between being dominant or weak, Zelensky or Putin, Civ Lifer subscriber, or anything else. So in this Civ 6 video, we're talking about 5 mistakes everyone makes at one point or another, and, in my opinion, is the biggest reason between winning the game and catching an even fatter L than my social life. If you enjoy, leave a like and subscribe to not miss out on future content, and let me know down below some of your own mistakes, or a new video idea, or I should make. Just type in Q in the comments, I guess. Doesn't really matter. More algorithmic for me. The first mistake I have is settling for a city and not the empire. What I mean by that is that instead of trying to settle the best city for that individual city, settle what is best for the entire empire and your game. If moving a couple tiles lets you settle another city at the cost of Giga Chad as a city, then it's worth it. Settlers don't want to have half their tiles as unworkable desert and starve. Well, there's 5 silver tiles in that desert there, so change my middle name to Stalin, cause you're not gonna be eating. The main things to look out for is whether you can settle any more cities, as more districts equals more great people and more yields, or for any unique luxuries or strategic resources you might desperately need. If Gandhi makes the mistake of loading into my game within 20 tiles, he deserves complete annihilation, and I can't do that without some iron, so you are going to settle that terrible iron city. At the end of the day, getting a great city is important, don't get me wrong. After all, you need production to get those sweet districts anyway, but you have the option of a slightly weaker city for potential benefits for your entire empire, then take that 10 times out of 10. The only time I would not recommend doing this and trying to get a monstrous city is if my capital is worse than New York traffic at 8 a.m. on a Monday. If my capital is Scooby-Doo-Doo, then you need a couple really strong cities to pick up the slack, as the difference between a strong capital and a strong regular city even is massive due to the amount of yields the palace gives you, and due to the fact that getting a capital city from turn 1 is a lot better than getting a really strong city at like turn 20, so if you do want to make up for a terrible capital, you are going to need multiple really strong cities to make up for the lack of, administrative center. Every craftsman needs the proper tools to succeed. Imagine telling a plumber to fix your toilet without any tools, or telling a carpenter to build your house without any hammer or nails. Seems like a challenge you'd see in the Saw movies or Squid Game, and settling cities in Civ 6 without the necessities is the exact same thing. These necessities being knockoff Rockefeller with Samuel-style sideburns from Dishonored to get provision and settlers that don't cost a population point, and then colonization policy card and ancestral hall for double settler production and a free builder for each settled city. All this added up lets you get twice as many settlers, free builders, more population. Heck, I'll throw in a PS5, might as well, considering all the free stuff you're already getting. Now, getting all this is easier said than done. Yes, settling 1 or 2 cities before you get all this is kind of a necessity, as not only does it allow you to get political philosophy faster for the government and ancestral hall by building monuments in those 2 cities, but it will also allow you to grow those cities earlier for a quicker power spike so they can be productive earlier on. But after that, 2-3 cities focus on getting culture, as governors, policy cards, and government plaza and their buildings are all unlocked with the civic tree. Get a monument no later than second in the build order in your capital, and try to buy them in your other settled cities. Grow to 6 population for early empire, get a builder for craftsmanship, find a new continent for foreign trade, and get a quick campus for state workforce. Doing all that really isn't the hardest thing to do earlier on, and it gets everything boosted so you can get political philosophy faster. All in all, after you get all that, that's when you start infinite settler spamming, and with enough luck, you should be able to get 10 cities by turn 100, and possibly 20 by about turn 150, which at that point guarantees wins from my experience. This all can lead up to about 10 extra population, 10 extra builders, twice as many cities, or that same amount of cities twice as fast. All that for free by building 10 settlers in your Magnus/Ancestral Hall city, by just being a little more patient and going for culture in the super early game before pumping out enough babies to colonize the world. Here's a good one that not many people really talk or think about. It's about as mentioned as Voldemort in Harry Potter, and that's not having a core of your main cities centered around a couple of buildings. Let me explain. The first 6 cities you settle will in all likelihood be the best cities you ever settle, as they will come out sooner and are able to be built up a lot quicker. And for that reason, setting up a core of cities within 6 tiles of each other can massively change your game. The Colosseum, Entertainment Complex, and most importantly the Industrial Zone all have buildings that give all cities within 6 tiles of the district or wonder or whatever different benefits, whether it be production and power from industrial zones, amenities from zoos and coliseums, and getting culture from those coliseums. These 3 wonders or districts are some of the best in the entire game, and that isn't even mentioning different wonders like, for example, the Temple of Artemis. And even though only 1 industrial zone can be used per city after getting a factory, like if you have multiple industrial zones within 6 tiles of a city center, with factories, they're not both going to work on that city, only one is, unless you have Magnus's vertical integration. That city will then be able to use all the industrial zones within 6 tiles. This is more huge than YouTubers' egos for other reasons too. Instead of having to build multiple factories, just one will be enough to give all nearby cities the yields. Not to mention the Colosseum giving culture and amenities being big in the early game. And with all these cities snuggled up closer than British people in bomb shelters in 1940, you'll have more district adjacency, giving you large amounts of any yields you want, depending on the districts you're building for your victory type. So what I recommend doing in this instance is to set up a core of really powerful cities within a certain area, so you can have the Colosseum, Industrial Zone, and any other wonders powering all of your quote-unquote core cities. So if you need a wonder in the late game, you can only build it in one specific core city, for example. Like, let's say I can only build that wonder in my 5th city, for example. You can put Magnus in that city, get the vertical integration boost, and get the production from all the nearby industrial zones to build the wonder faster than just having cities all over the place and having limited production as a result, with the potential of losing that wonder. And that's not just for wonders. You can also think about it for example, spaceports. Spaceports are some of the most expensive buildings in the game, and having multiple of them will be the difference between winning 10 turns earlier or losing a nail-biter victory. The reason is because in the late game, you have these, for example, the laser stations that you can build in multiple cities at a time, and getting more of them faster will let you get to that 50 threshold to win a science victory a lot faster than just having one spaceport. And moving Magnus around to different cities to construct those spaceports a lot faster will allow you to get started on, for example, campus research grants to get a lot more science earlier on, or to begin setting up the laser stations if you took a while to build the spaceport. All in all, settle a core of cities around a specific point to have multiple superpower cities that can change on a whim depending on where your Governor Magnus is going to be, which is pretty much the equivalent of having the Monstars on your side as your core of operations. Getting a city with monstrous yields is like giving an insomniac melatonin or Viagra to a guy who can't get it up anymore. You're going to have a blissful night. But sometimes yields aren't everything. Not tile yields, anyways. One of the biggest mistakes, in my opinion, is settling a city with great yields instead of great districts. And there's nothing, wrong with that, I guess. Don't get me wrong. A city with natural yields is still going to be an amazing city, but more importantly, in my opinion, is getting better districts for multiple reasons. First of which being the fact that in order to work the tiles, you need population, which requires food, housing, and amenities, all of which become limited in the mid to late game as you sort of hit a cap on housing and amenities and even food. So a city with 10 great tiles, but you can only work 7 for most of the game, is going to be not as strong as a city with a plus 10 industrial zone and campus with the same population and decent tiles. Not only that, but 5, for example, 3-2 tiles and a plus 2 industrial zone and campus versus, maybe 5-to-1 tiles, one less food, one less production. Obviously not as good, but getting a +10 industrial zone and +7 campus instead of the +2 industrial zone and +2 campus we talked about is a lot better for the future. Plus, you don't need population to work the districts. You need it to get the districts, sure, but 3 specialty districts only require 7 population, which is super easy to get and all you really need. Getting, for example, in a culture victory, holy sites, theater squares, and industrial zones, that's really all you need in most of your cities, as the tech tree isn't as important, at least not until computers, and also commercial hubs can be really nice, and getting trade routes to every civ is pretty good, but again, it isn't exactly a necessity for every single city, especially if those 3 districts you can actually get make you wet your undergarments. Yields are great, don't get me wrong, but especially considering yields like culture, science, and faith are mainly restricted to districts, and even if they're on a tile like turtles, or tobacco, or cocoa, it only adds up to maybe 2 or 3 total culture throughout the entire empire. Sacrificing a spot with better food and production for a much better campus and industrial zone is, in my opinion at least, always worth it. And finally, a settling plan. What is a settling plan, you ask? Well, in Civ 6, you're obviously not alone. There are multiple other leaders trying their best to win the game, take it out of your rightful hands, and a lot of the times, especially on the higher difficulties, the AI cheats a lot. They cheat so much, in fact, that their pants at this point is nothing short of a Monferno. And with these cheats, they can forward settle and cut you off like a road rager who deserves to have their license revoked. This is a problem, as if they do end up forward settling you, they will limit the amount of cities you can settle, not only by taking that city spot, but because with the loyalty pressure they will be pressuring, you're also going to sort of lose a sphere of influence in a way, and you're not going to be able to settle as outward as you wanted to in the first place. Therefore, having a plan to cut off the enemy in their tracks by settling strategic cities is important to prevent the AI from settling and to allow you to settle the most amount of cities possible. For example, if I know that, for example, Scotland is like 10 tiles away, I will try to settle my next city as close as I possibly can to Scotland, obviously after factoring in loyalty and the fact that they might decide to take that city by force, so that all the cities around that city are getting loyalty pressure from my newly settled city, and it sort of increases the likelihood that I will be able to settle other nearby cities, because loyalty is probably the biggest limiting factor in this game. Knowing where to settle first, depending on the AI tendencies, loyalty pressure, and where exactly they're going to want to settle around them, you can exert your will, letting you fill out a much bigger empire by knowing which cities to settle first to stop the AI in their tracks, instead of, crawling your way to the border of the enemy AI city by settling your cities, one step at a time, until you realize you only had room for 5 cities, and Montezuma has 3 times as much science as you, and sending in bombers while you still have pikes and swords, when you could have had those cities that the AI ended up settling. Watch out for loyalty, of course, as getting into a dark age while the AI is in a golden age, you might as well just serve up the built-up city you put your heart and soul into on a silver platter for them. If you enjoy, leave a like and subscribe to not miss out on future content, and let me know any other mistakes you might have down below in the comments, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.